We're not going to achieve this by building walls or hardening ourselves. Oh no, quite the contrary. We're going to do it by becoming like water, fluid, adaptable, and ultimately ungraspable. Let's dive into the first principle, shall we? And remember, as we go through these principles, they're not separate entities, but rather facets of the same jewel, reflecting and refracting into one another. Embrace the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. Now, this might sound like a mouthful, but bear with me. You see, we often think of ourselves as separate entities, little islands of consciousness in a vast, indifferent universe. But that's not quite right, is it? It's a bit like thinking that a wave is separate from the ocean. Imagine, if you will, that you are a wave. You rise, you fall, you crash upon the shore. You might think, I am this wave, and I am separate from all other waves, but are you really? Aren't you made of the same water as every other wave? And when you crash upon the shore, do you cease to exist, or do you simply return to the vast ocean from whence you came? You see, my friends, we are not separate from the universe. We are the universe. We are the universe experiencing itself subjectively. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all of it came from the cosmos. You are, quite literally, made of stardust. And it doesn't stop there. The air you breathe, the food you eat, the thoughts you think, all of these are in constant exchange with the world around you. You are not a static, unchanging entity, but a process, a flow, a dance of energy and matter. When you truly understand this, when you feel it in your bones, something remarkable happens. You realize that you cannot be affected by anything because you are everything. The thing that you thought was affecting you is, in fact, a part of you. It's like your left hand trying to affect your right hand. It's all you. This understanding leads us seamlessly into our second principle. Recognize the illusion of separateness. Now that we've established our fundamental interconnectedness, let's look at why we so often fail to see it. We perceive ourselves as separate because that's how our minds have evolved to navigate the world. It's a useful illusion in many ways. After all, if you didn't perceive yourself as separate from that oncoming bus, you might not jump out of the way. But while this perception of separateness is useful for survival, it's also the root of much of our suffering. We feel alone, isolated, vulnerable to the whims of a seemingly hostile universe. We build walls, we create defenses, we struggle and strive to protect this illusory self. But what if we could see through this illusion? What if we could recognize that the boundaries we perceive are not solid and impermeable, but fluid and permeable? What if we could see that the line between self and other is not fixed, but constantly shifting? Think of it this way. When you eat an apple, at what point does the apple stop being not you and become you? Is it when you bite into it? When you swallow it? When it's broken down in your stomach? When its molecules are absorbed into your bloodstream? You see, the boundary is not clear-cut. It's a process, a gradual transformation. And it's not just physical. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your very sense of self, all of these are in constant exchange with the world around you. The books you read, the conversations you have, the experiences you undergo, all of these shape who you are. You are not a fixed, unchanging entity, but a process, a flow, a constant becoming. When you recognize this, when you see through the illusion of separateness, you realize that nothing can truly affect you, because there is no solid separate you to be affected. You are not a thing, but a process. You are not a noun, but a verb. This understanding naturally flows into our third principle. Embrace change as the only constant. Now, my friends, if you've been following along, you might be feeling a bit unsettled. After all, we've just undermined some of our most basic assumptions about ourselves and the world. But fear not, for in this apparent chaos lies great freedom. You see, we often resist change. We cling to the familiar, to the comfortable. We try to hold on to things, to freeze moments in time. But in doing so, we create suffering for ourselves, because change, you see, is the only constant in the universe. Everything is in flux. Everything is flowing. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced. Your thoughts are in constant motion. The world around you is in perpetual transformation. Even the seemingly solid mountain is slowly being worn away by wind and rain. Now you might be thinking, but Alan, this sounds terrifying. If everything is constantly changing, what can I hold on to? What can I rely on? And to that, I say exactly. Now you're getting it. The secret, my dear friends, is not to try to hold on to anything, but to learn to flow with the changes, to become like water. Water, you see, is soft and yielding, but it can wear away rock. It doesn't resist, it flows around obstacles. It takes the shape of whatever contains it, yet it's always true to its nature. When you embrace change, when you learn to flow with it rather than resist it, you become invulnerable. Because what can affect that which is already changing? What can disturb that which is already in motion? Imagine a leaf floating on a river. It doesn't try to control its journey. It doesn't resist the current. It simply flows. Sometimes it might get caught in an eddy. Sometimes it might rush over rapids, but it always continues its journey. Be like that leaf, my friends. Don't resist the flow of life, but learn to dance with it. And this brings us naturally to our fourth principle. Let go of attachments. Now, when I say let go of attachments, I don't mean you should become some sort of emotionless robot devoid of all human feeling. Not at all. What I mean is to hold everything lightly, to enjoy without clinging. You see, attachment is based on the illusion that we can possess things, that we can make them permanent. But as we've discussed, everything is in constant flux. Everything is temporary. The beautiful flower that blooms today will wither tomorrow. The relationship that brings you joy now may end in the future. Even your own body and mind are constantly changing. When we attach ourselves to things, when we try to hold on to them, we create suffering for ourselves because we're trying to do the impossible, we're trying to make the impermanent permanent. Instead, imagine you're at a magnificent banquet. There are countless delicious dishes laid out before you. Now you could try to hoard all the food, to possess it all. But in doing so, you'd miss out on the joy of actually tasting and savoring each dish. Instead, why not sample each dish, enjoy it fully, and then move on to the next? This is how we should approach life. Enjoy the people in your life, but don't try to possess them. Appreciate the beauty around you, but don't try to capture it. Savour your experiences, but don't cling to them. When you hold things lightly, when you learn to let go, you become invulnerable. Because what can affect you if you're not attached to anything? This doesn't mean you don't care. On the contrary, when you're not attached, you're free to care even more deeply, because your care isn't based on what you can get or keep, but on a pure appreciation of what is. And this leads us beautifully to our fifth principle. Live in the present moment. Now, my friends, this might sound like a cliché. After all, we've all heard about the importance of living in the now, but let's really think about what this means. You see, most of us spend our lives oscillating between the past and the future. We regret what has happened, or we anxiously anticipate what might happen. But here's the kicker, neither the past nor the future actually exist. The past is just a memory, a story we tell ourselves. The future is just imagination, a projection of our hopes and fears. The only thing that's real, the only thing that truly exists, is this present moment. Right here, right now, this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness. When you truly live in the present moment, you become invulnerable, because nothing can affect the past, it's already gone. Nothing can affect the future, it hasn't happened yet. The only thing that can be affected is this present moment. And when you're fully present, fully aware, you realize that this moment is perfect just as it is. Think about it. Have you ever had a problem in the present moment? I don't mean thinking about a problem, I mean an actual problem. Right here, right now. You might be thinking about a problem, you might be anticipating a problem, but in this very moment, everything is exactly as it should be. When you live in the present, you're like a surfer riding the wave of life. You're not trying to control the wave. You're not worried about the waves that have passed or the waves that are coming. You're simply riding this wave, right here, right now. And here's the beautiful thing. When you're fully present, you're more alive, more awake, more aware. Colors seem brighter, sounds clearer, experiences richer. You're not dulled by regret or anxiety. You're fully here, fully now. This presence, this awareness leads us naturally to our sixth principle. Cultivate mindful awareness. Now, when I say mindful awareness, I'm not talking about some sort of strained concentration. I'm talking about a relaxed, open awareness of what is. You see, most of the time, we're not really aware. We're lost in our thoughts, our stories, our interpretations. We're not experiencing life directly, but through a filter of concepts and judgments. Mindful awareness is about dropping that filter. It's about experiencing life directly as it is, without judgment or interpretation. It's about being the witness to your experience rather than getting caught up in it. Imagine you're watching a movie. You can get so caught up in the story that you forget you're watching a movie. You laugh, you cry, you feel fear or excitement. But at any moment, you can step back and remember, oh, this is just a movie. You don't stop enjoying the movie, but you're no longer at the mercy of its emotional roller coaster. This is what mindful awareness does for your life. You don't stop participating in life, but you're no longer at the mercy of every thought, every emotion, every experience. You can step back and witness it all with a sense of spacious awareness. When you cultivate this mindful awareness, you become invulnerable because you realize that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not your experiences. You are the awareness in which all these things arise and pass away. This awareness is like the sky, and your thoughts and experiences are like clouds. The clouds may come and go, they may be stormy or peaceful, but the sky itself remains unaffected. It simply witnesses the passing show. And as you cultivate this awareness, you naturally move into our seventh principle. Transcend the ego. Now, when I say transcend the ego, I don't mean that you should try to destroy or get rid of your ego. The ego has its place. It's a useful tool for navigating the practical aspects of life. But the problem arises when we mistake this tool for our true self. You see, the ego is like a character in a play. It has its role, its lines, its costume. But it's not who you really are. You are the actor behind the character, the awareness behind the ego. The ego is always concerned with itself. It's always trying to protect itself, to enhance itself, to prove itself. And in doing so, it creates a lot of unnecessary suffering. It takes everything personally. It's constantly comparing itself to others, constantly seeking approval, constantly fearing rejection. But when you transcend the ego, you realize that none of this really matters. You realize that you are not this limited, separate self, but the vast awareness in which all selves arise. Imagine you're dreaming. In the dream, you might be a prince or a pauper, a hero or a villain. You might experience all sorts of adventures and misadventures. But when you wake up, you realize that none of it was real. You were always the dreamer, not the dream character. In the same way, when you transcend the ego, you wake up from the dream of separation. You realize that you are not this limited self, but the unlimited awareness in which all selves arise. And here's the beautiful thing: when you transcend the ego, you don't become less, you become more. You don't lose your individuality, you expand beyond it. You're no longer confined to one character in the play of life. You can play all the characters or none of them. When you transcend the ego, you become invulnerable, because what can affect that which has no fixed identity, no fixed boundaries? You become like the wind. You can't be grasped, you can't be harmed, you can't be contained. This transcendence of the ego naturally leads us to our eighth principle. Recognize the unity of opposites. Now, my friends, this might sound a bit paradoxical, but bear with me. You see, we tend to think in terms of opposites, good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and we usually prefer one side of these pairs over the other. We want the good without the bad, the pleasure without the pain, the life without the death. But here's the thing: these opposites are not really separate. They're two sides of the same coin. They define each other, they create each other, they imply each other. Now think about it. How would you know what pleasure is if you'd never experienced pain? How would you know what light is if you'd never experienced darkness? How would you appreciate life if there was no death? You see, life moves in cycles, in waves. The peak implies the trough implies the peak. It's all one movement. When you recognize this unity of opposites, something remarkable happens. You stop resisting half of life. You stop trying to have one without the other. You realize that it's all part of the same dance. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. You can still have preferences. But you hold these preferences lightly, knowing that the opposite is always implied, always potential. Imagine you're riding a roller coaster. You can prefer the upward climbs to the downward plunges, but you know that both are part of the ride. You don't try to have a roller coaster that only goes up. That wouldn't be a roller coaster at all. When you recognize the unity of opposites, you become invulnerable, because you're no longer fighting against half of life. You're no longer trying to have the impossible: pleasure without pain, gain without loss, life without death. Instead, you embrace the whole of life with all its ups and downs, all its light and shadow. You realize that it's all you, it's all part of the cosmic dance. And this recognition leads us beautifully to our ninth principle. Embrace the wisdom of uncertainty. Now, my friends, we live in a world that values certainty. We want to know, we want to be sure, we want to have everything figured out. But here's the paradox: the more we think we know, the more we close ourselves off to the vast mystery of existence. You see, certainty is a kind of death. When you're certain, you stop exploring, you stop questioning, you stop growing. You become rigid, inflexible, stuck in your beliefs. But when you embrace uncertainty, when you cultivate a sense of wonder and not knowing, something magical happens. You open yourself to infinite possibilities. You become like a child again, seeing the world with fresh eyes, always ready to learn, to discover, to be amazed. Think about it. The greatest scientific discoveries have come not from certainty, but from questioning. From being willing to admit, I don't know. The greatest spiritual insights have come not from dogma, but from a deep sense of mystery and wonder. When you embrace uncertainty, you become invulnerable. Because what can shake someone who's not attached to any fixed beliefs? What can disturb someone who's always open to new possibilities? This doesn't mean you become wishy-washy or indecisive. You can still act with conviction, but you hold your beliefs lightly. You're always ready to revise your understanding in the light of new information or experiences. Imagine you're an explorer in a vast, uncharted territory. Every step brings new discoveries, new vistas. You don't know what's around the next bend. And that's what makes it exciting. That's what keeps you alert, awake, alive. When you embrace the wisdom of uncertainty, you live in a state of constant discovery. You're never bored, never stuck. because you're always open to the new, the unknown, the mysterious. And this openness, this embrace of uncertainty, leads us to our 10th and final principle. Realize that you are already complete. Now, my dear friends, we've come to the culmination of our journey, and it might surprise you because it's both the simplest and the most profound principle of all. You see, we spend so much of our lives trying to become something, trying to achieve something, trying to get somewhere. We think that if we just get that job, that relationship, that experience, then we'll be complete, then we'll be whole, then we'll be happy. But here's the amazing truth. You are already complete. You are already whole. You are already perfect just as you are. Now, I know what you might be thinking. But Alan, you might say, I have flaws, I make mistakes, I'm not perfect unto that. I say, exactly. Your flaws, your mistakes, your imperfections. These are all part of your perfection. You see, we've been sold a lie. We've been told that we need to be something other than what we are. We've been told that we're lacking, that we're incomplete, that we need to be fixed. But the truth is, you are a perfect expression of the universe, just as you are. Just as a tree doesn't try to be anything other than a tree, just as a mountain doesn't try to be anything other than a mountain. You don't need to try to be anything other than what you are. This doesn't mean you can't grow, change, or improve, but it means that this growth comes from a place of self-acceptance, not self-rejection. It comes from a recognition of your inherent completeness, not from a sense of lack or deficiency. When you realize that you are already complete, you become truly invulnerable, because what can affect that which is already whole? What can disturb that which is already perfect? Imagine a circle. You can add to it, you can take away from it, but it's always a complete circle. In the same way, you are always complete, always whole, always perfect, not in some idealized sense, but in the sense of being perfectly you, perfectly this, perfectly here and now. And here's the beautiful thing. When you realize your inherent completeness, you're free to play, to explore, to create without the burden of trying to become something. You're free to fully be yourself, to fully express your unique flavor of existence. Now, my friends, as we come to the end of our exploration of these 10 principles, I want you to remember these are not separate ideas, but different facets of the same diamond. They all point to the same fundamental truth, that you are not a separate, limited entity in a vast, indifferent universe, but that you are the universe itself, expressing itself in a unique and beautiful way. When you truly understand and embody these principles, you become like the sky, vast, open, unchanging in your essence, yet constantly changing in your expression. You become like the ocean, deep, powerful, unaffected by the waves on your surface. You realize that nothing can truly affect you, because there is no separate you to be affected. You are not a thing, but a process. Not a noun, but a verb. Not a separate wave, but the entire ocean. And in this realization lies true freedom, true peace, true invulnerability. Not the invulnerability of a stone wall that resists all change, but the invulnerability of water that flows around all obstacles. Not the invulnerability of isolation and separation, but the invulnerability of total connection and unity with all that is. So, my dear friends, as you go forth from here, remember you are already complete, already whole, already perfect. You are the universe experiencing itself. You are consciousness dancing in human form. Embrace the interconnectedness of all things. See through the illusion of separateness. Flow with change. Let go of attachments. Live in the present moment. Cultivate mindful awareness. Transcend the ego. Recognize the unity of opposites. Embrace uncertainty. And above all, realize your inherent completeness. When you live from this understanding, you'll find that nothing can truly affect you. Not because you become hard or insensitive, but because you become so open, so fluid, so vast that there's nothing to affect, nothing to disturb, nothing to harm. You'll move through life with grace and ease, enjoying its ups and downs as part of the cosmic dance. You'll love deeply without attachment, act powerfully without ego, and live fully without fear. And in this state of being, you'll discover a joy, a peace, a freedom that is your birthright as a human being. You'll discover the truth of who you really are. So go forth, my friends. Be like the sky, vast and open. Be like the ocean, deep and powerful. Be like the wind, free and ungraspable. Be who you truly are, the universe itself, dancing in human form. And remember, in the immortal words of the Upanishads, Tat Tvamasi, that thou art, you are that. You are the universe. You are all that is, has been, and ever will be. Thank you, and may you all awaken to the truth of your being.